and welcome to another episode of In Case You Want to Take Notes, the podcast for performers by performers, where we open the book on show business. I'm Kristen.
I'm Britt.
And even though we're recording in December, we're releasing this on New Year's Day. So I guess Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Now, New Year, it's time to reflect, time to set our resolutions, new year, new me, you know, that kind of stuff, Britt.
Yup.
Yeah, and so we thought maybe we'd finally get to the topic that we have been wanting to do, well, for about 2 years now.
For about 2 years. Well, before we actually got in front of a microphone, when we were starting our little brainstorm list, mental health was at the top of that list, and specifically Aimee, which Kristen, you were across and knew about. And so we popped that off the top of our list, and we wished and we hoped and we reached out and we got Aimee. Yay!
Oh. Hello, thank you so much for coming in, Aimee.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so glad we got here 2 years later. So
yeah!
It's great.
It was a journey. Mental health is so important to us, particularly in the creative sphere, because it's often something that only really gets addressed after maybe it's a bigger issue. And so we thought, being a podcast where we want to put out as many resources as possible to all performers, whether community through to professional, to make sure that we can kind of, I guess, help make the journey and the career a little bit easier.
Well, and if you've listened to our last episode about accounting, you know that we love to seek out specialists that are specifically understanding the creative industries. So the creative arts, we feel, probably needs just like a little bit more of a focused touch. We deal with a lot more emotions in our work. We deal with that. So we wanted to make sure that we had somebody that was working in those like performing arts industries. So we're super, super happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you. No, thanks for having me. And I mean, what a follow on from accounting, right? I can't think of anything else more stressful.
Yes, we're doing that hit list of the topics that just everybody should know, needs to know.
And you might need some of the resources we talk about today after trying to sort out your accounts. So,
yes.
Oh boy.
So I guess let's start at the beginning, Aimee. How did the Aimee project come about?
Yeah. So we've been around, we're coming into our 6th year, or we are in our 6th year, which is crazy. But Aimee came about at the end of 2019. So my sort of background, if you backpedal a little bit more, I sort of dabbled in the arts and culture space. I was going to go into a performing degree when I left school, but then decided out of the blue I didn't want to perform or audition to get into said course, insert performance anxiety here, without knowing, and decided I'd do some tech work instead. So I studied tech for a year, and a family member of mine had worked in the tech space. I thought it was pretty cool. You didn't have to put yourself out there artistically. It wasn't too much stress, I thought. I was so wrong. Yeah, so essentially I'd sort of dabbled in that space and went from that to performing arts to some design work to a creative studio, and never really felt secure or like I fit in one particular place, and didn't really think about the fact that it might not be a me problem. It could be a space problem, or there could be other factors at play in regards to why I feel that way. And I ended up working as a counsellor for a number of years, and then at the end of 2019 my role was sort of shifting, and I thought, well, now's probably a good time to sort of, partner those two things that I really love, because always thinking about like performance psychology or sports psychology, and particularly with performing arts, some of them are athletes, not just performers, but athletes, and that sort of space really, I guess, piqued my interest. And but also another, I guess, area of interest was live events. So I love live events. That's where I go to fill my cup up. But when I am feeling anxious, it's probably the last place I want to be. and and this was prior to COVID, and so we'd sort of had a time where there were a series of deaths at festivals, but the sort of festival scene was still very much alive, and Splendor would sell out in a matter of hours if you were fortunate enough to get a ticket, that sort of environment. And we had medics there, but I never saw like a social or emotional support space, or a space that you could go and just chill where it wasn't a medic tent. So I looked around sort of what was happening in the space across Australia and internationally, and there were a couple of orgs that were in Australia that one of them still exists today, Support Act, post-COVID receives a whole lot of funding, which is fantastic to support the work that they do with the helpline and the grants for performers, and now across the creative industries, which is amazing. But I guess prior to COVID, they had limited services and eligibility, as all sort of emerging organisations and areas in those spaces were. And we also had the Arts Wellbeing Collective that was in its pilot phase. So they, pilots, we don't know how long they're going to be around, but it came out of a study that was done by Safe Work Victoria, and we saw the hazards of the workplace, and that I guess it verified what we all knew, but we couldn't really quantify. And so that was the initiative that was sort of started by Greta Bradman and a whole heap of other people to sort of help support the performing arts. So we had these sort of two supports, but one was very performing arts based, one was very music based. And some of the eligibility criteria, depending on what you were after, you needed to show that you were a professional for at least 5 years to get this support.
Yeah.
Now, as someone that was in their mid to late 20s at that time, that's almost half my adulthood. And I don't stay in one place for 5 years. So how do I demonstrate that? And like, how many years do I have to spend before I am deemed professional? And we need these supports when we're emerging, right? Like we need to be putting in these habits and these supports. Like accounting, getting our books and learning all these skills as we grow. It's not something we're all of a sudden going to know when we've sort of, quote unquote, made it or deemed ourselves professional. And so that was sort of what was happening in Australia. And I looked over in the UK and the US, and there was a couple of organisations in the States that were sort of music industry specific, and in the UK, again, there was a couple that was sort of music industry specific, but there wasn't really anything that dabbled in all areas. And what we know is that a lot of the industries experience different and also same symptoms and challenges, and that a lot of us change roles and change areas. Sometimes we'll be front of camera or on stage, next will be tech, or we'll wear a lot of different hats, and depending on opportunities we might ebb and flow from one to another. And there was one that sort of piqued my interest, which was providing, I guess, social and emotional support at live events, front and back of house. And there was a program that was called Live Live, so spelled live basically. And it was delivered by an organisation that's called Music and You, and they've sort of transitioned now, but Music and You was run by a psychotherapist called Jack Williamson. Jack worked for Sony and Warner in the music industry, unfortunately lost his brother to suicide, and sort of had a similar experience to me in regards to training in a space to then support the community that we're passionate about, and delivered this Live Live project. And it was delivered in partnership with an artist that was emerging at the time, and is actually in Brisbane currently, funny enough, called Lewis Capaldi. So Lewis did an arena show around Europe, and they sort of piloted this program called Live Live, and it was sort of the centerpiece for what they hoped to take to all their sort of arena shows, but also do internationally. So Jack was fortunate enough to sort of talk me through what the hopes were for the project, and very much, if there's nothing like that here, build it, and then hopefully when acts like this come, we can plug it in, and all this sort of stuff happened. COVID then happened 4 months later. Oh boy. So so put everything on ice, shows, the arts, but We were still expected to perform in our living rooms for money and all these sorts of things and be turned to for entertainment. And but as far as live gigs and culture and venues and that sort of ecosystem and economy, it all got put on ice. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we can't do any live events. What are we going to do? It was myself, counsellor, and a psychologist friend were like, well, we can counsel and support people. So we sort of just put that out as like a, you know, if you need to chat, we're here sort of thing, not really thinking it would go anywhere and would pick up where we left off in 6 or 8 months' time. Who knows? Little did we know. And then we had an organisation called Arts Hub approach us. So they're still around and they still work with us, and they wanted counselling for their team. And that's sort of where we, I guess, lent into what you see today. So we are, we work right across all arts and cultural creative industries. We work with organisations and workplaces and peak bodies to do counselling and education, workshops, talks. We do community pieces where we go into communities and deliver workshops and mental health first aid training. And then we also work with individuals, so where they can access, again, counselling and education, and we have webinars and all sorts of bits and pieces happening. And we're still growing 5 or 6 years later, and crazy enough, we haven't sort of packed up. But I guess we're very unique as far as the fact that we're not a charity, so we're not relying on funding. We have a model that allows us to work with partners that require a service and then reinvest that profit back into our community and our individual, I guess, areas. So the aim is that, you know, the artists in our state theatres have the same opportunities and supports as our community theatre troops if something went wrong, or if you are sort of ebb and flowing, or if you're a freelancer, right, in the festival ends and then you need continued support. So now we're at a place where people have changed careers and roles and stuff, and they're still engaging with us in different areas of their space. So so I guess that's Aimee. We're very unique.
Amazing.
But still standing, I suppose. So
Yay, congratulations. But you do provide a service that is needed. It's very necessary. And like you said, not just in our professional spheres, but those emerging community spaces where people are learning how to be performers, be creators, be musicians, and it is the hardest slog of it all sometimes. But I came to Aimee through a producer friend of mine that I was working with, and who was also very passionate about performers having what they need while we were on the road. I was a stage manager for him at the time, so it was really nice to see that the sphere is kind of changing in how we approach mental health in the arts sector.
Yeah, totally. You know, and I think that's it, is that we're realizing across, I guess, all areas of the industry, right, from government right through to small producers that will put on a show and, you know, tour it, and then it'll sort of dissolve after the end, is that we need these supports because we go into the arts because we love it and we're passionate about it and it's a hobby, and then eventually we make it our occupation. And how fortunate are we enough to do what we love? But with that, because we are so passionate about it, sometimes we might go a little bit further than what we would if we weren't passionate about it. But also there are things that we do that aren't the glitzy, glamorous part of it, the invisible load, if you will. Like you said, Kristen, you were on tour, and like there's so many things that happen on tour as far as being away from community, support services, routine, all these sorts of things that affect our well-being. So it's definitely something that, even from a government point of view, there's now the establishment of creative workplaces through Creative Australia to cover not only just mental health, but also things like, you know, you mentioned accounting, like what sort of things do we need for financial responsibility as artists or people that are working and supporting in the arts and culture space. And yeah, I guess we are realizing that this thing is so much more than just putting on a lovely costume, getting on stage and crossing our fingers and hoping it works out for the best. There are a lot of things that are required to have that sort of output, but also having those conversations around peak performance versus sustainable performance, and how do we equip ourselves so those peaks and troughs are not quite as high and low, if you will.
Yeah, that is so fair, because the highs are really high and then the lows are like, how am I going to pay my rent? But I think that it's really, and particularly we talk to a lot of young performers, and just jumping just from role to role, psyche to psyche, really, is also something that, if even through a university course or years and years of classes, you don't necessarily get to the crux of like, how do you de-roll? How do you let go? How do you not make that personal? How do you keep it kind of on the outside of you? And I guess we live in a world where method acting is celebrated a lot of the time too. So going to those deep, dark places feels glamorous, feels glitzy, feels like you're doing the role right, but you don't realize, I guess, the toll that can take on you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think I always find this so interesting when we have these conversations, because like I could have this conversation at our state theatre with our state theatre performers, or at a you know, like a forum that a local council's put on, and arts and culture workers or freelancers or students come and learn. But our body responds the exact same way, whether we are acting or pretending. You know, it's not real.
Yeah.
But our body responds the same way as if it was real as well. So, you know, there's a thing called vicarious trauma, which we can take on from either reliving something consistently, particularly if it's a work where we're maybe method acting, or there might be some confronting scenes or things that if it was on television, you know, it might be MA 15 plus or whatever like that, maybe not PG, but also those observing it. So if you think about the people that are observing you deliver this work in rehearsals and on stage, you've got our stage managers, you know, audience members, ushers, all these sorts of things, people observing the work that are also seeing what you're doing, amazing, maybe enjoying it, but also are potentially experiencing different things like vicarious trauma as well. So how, like you said, like how do you de-roll, and how do you also leave that stuff at the door? It's not as simple as being like, oh, it's not going to affect me, I'm fine. We really do need to establish routines and I guess resources and strategies to help us navigate that, and understand that sometimes we have stuff that stays with us even after we think that we've dealt with it, and we're like, oh, that's a little bit uncomfortable, what do I do about this? And so making sure that if your strategies that you have put in place, if you have, then you know you've got this monkey that you need to get rid of. And so how do you get rid of the monkey? You do that by talking to someone, or working through it with someone that can support you in that space, because sometimes we're aware of it and sometimes we're not. So yeah, super interesting. You know, yeah, we're learning so much more about the method and the practice and what needs to be put in place across all sorts of different levels. Like you said, like having your producer friend provide that support as well, because that is something that, you know, if you don't use it, wonderful, don't access the counselling. Maybe you've got some really lovely support people around you, maybe you are sticking to a nice routine, maybe you've got the strategies and you're in a space where it's not for you, or you don't need it right then and there, and that's great. I love that for you. A day where we're not needed is a great day in my book. But on the off chance that something happens, or you feel like you've got that niggling feeling, it's not like, oh yikes, what do we do now? You know, something's gone wrong. You have that support system, you have that relationship and that I guess support there to access when you need it. So and it doesn't have to be spiky stuff, it can just be that things are feeling a little bit niggly, or you know, people on the road, personalities, you know, temperatures.
Yeah.
Kristen's like, yep.
Yeah. You can just say
Yeah.
people on the road, and I think everyone who's been on tour will understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah, right. Like you put people in a room or a van for long periods of time, and personalities and temperatures are going to get hot and all these sorts of things. So how do we support ourselves and maybe have someone to talk to about, you know, stuff that we don't want to talk to the people we're on the road with either, or maybe don't want to call home and put a whole heap of stuff on our loved ones. So yeah, but it's very interesting, and it's definitely work that's happening across Australia, but you know, also in the States and the UK and stuff as well, which is great to see.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think sitting in the uncomfortable is something that not a lot of us are good at. And so instead of trying to seek out what those niggly things are, what that uncomfortability is, we just push, suppress. We just got to get through. And I think in this industry, we can also be asked to put ourselves into situations that might not feel entirely comfortable, but we feel like we've said yes to a project, or we've said yes to an artist, or we've said yes to a producer, and therefore that kind of implied consent across the board, not just with intimacy, but like literally anything. You're like, well, I said yes to this, so I have to keep saying yes. I think it means that these levels of support, Aimee particularly, is really important, because other charities, organizations have employee assistance programs. So the arts needs one too. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that is very new, you know, particularly like the employee assistance programs, or an EAP, which is a jazzy term for basically a partnership that an employer can have with like a third party organization to provide counseling. Sometimes you get workshops and resources and bits and pieces along with it too. A lot of our like bigger corporate companies would have it, or our government bodies would have it, but from a arts and culture place, it is still very new. You know, we've got some state bodies that are still don't have one and implementing it, or also now exploring, like they might have one through government, but is that also the right fit? Would you provide your, say, Brisbane Broncos with the same EAP as Brisbane City Council? Like, where does that sort of fit? You know, like what? There's support, which is great. Like they get support. Statistically, you know, now that we know that half the people living with a mental illness won't receive support, right? And so that's 1 in 5 Australians with a common mental illness. So that's anxiety disorders, mood or depressive disorders, and alcohol and other drug misuse disorders as well. So to get support, is great, but also looking at if we're building these workplaces or environments and we're looking at ticking the box, or providing that support, making sure we're making the right choice in that, beyond a line item, and that investment is going to come back to us through the output of our artists or our workforce. Because you know, it's quite different having to speak to someone, and this is through like an EAP or a workplace provider, which Aimee does with our counsellors, but we also work with community, you know, or we work with peak bodies that might be running a program with like Regional Arts Australia. They did a program called Regional Scribes. So 25 regional and remote young emerging writers writing these bodies of work in places where they might not have a whole lot of, it was a wonderful program. And maybe not a lot of support locally, but they had that support online through us, but also individuals being able to access us. But I think the thing with arts and culture is, you know, if you're not in the work, sometimes you don't understand the invisible load or those inputs that go into it, right? So what you see is the output at the end. You see the costumes and the lights and the applause, and not having to sit in front of a desk 9 to 5 potentially, and all these wonderful things. And so if you're explaining what you do to someone, whether you do it as a hobby, if you're a student, if you are established people will either understand it or people will be really curious, right? And be like, oh, tell me more about the lights and the costumes. On you went on tour, oh, that would be so much fun. You get to see all these places, and they don't see that sort of invisible load or the things that happen below that. And so when we are talking to people clinically, but also, you know, it might just be like a support person that you're going to, you might find that you're spending more time actually explaining what you do and those nuances rather than like what you're there to talk about and get support for, which I think we know, you know, sport, linking it back to like sports psychology, you want people that have an understanding of the industry and the spaces and the nuances, so you don't have to spend the first 2 hours of support actually explaining what the role of a producer is, you know, or why there's different assistant directors and what does each role do, and you don't do the, you know, you are, you know, Aimee, you're not Aimee the performer, you are your person, you don't have to put that mask up. Whereas sometimes if people ask a lot of questions more about what it is you do, you find that you're going from who you are to what you do, which is a whole different kettle of fish.
Truly, it is an interesting. I was a performer for a children's charity for a long time, so if I was engaging with individual EAP, it would be this is the job, and then we'd get to the issue. But the group sessions are amazing because the same psychologist was with us every time. So I have seen both ends of that spectrum, of someone that you don't need to explain to, so you can just get right into the nitty gritty of it all, and then maybe the other end where it can get a bit too much sometimes, and maybe might start making you feel like, oh, accessing support is tricky if I have to keep telling everyone every time I say something that I just don't want to do that anymore, so I just won't do it. So like we have seen a lot of that too. For performers, if you were, I know I'm about to ask a really big question.
Okay, brace myself.
Go for it, babe.
Where do they start, like in terms of strategies or implementing routine, sorry, where would you recommend to start?
Yeah,
a big question.
That is a really
and individualized.
Totally. And I love that you said that, right? Because mental health, what we do for our well-being is so personalized and so individual, right? And because it works for one person doesn't mean it'll work for us or that it's right for us. And then if we look at things also like cultural competency, our beliefs, you know, if we're spiritual or things like that, there are whole different things that come into, I guess, our well-being. And particularly if we look at it from like a westernized point of view versus, we know some cultures, you know, it's more of a mind, body, spirit sort of approach. So where would we start if we were a performer? I would probably say start with what you can do for yourself and maybe what you have in place currently. And that could probably be, what are you currently expecting from yourself? And what are you doing to support yourself to deliver that? Because the work we do is subjective, which I'm sure we know, you know. So whether you spend 30 minutes on a rehearsal, 3 months on a rehearsal, or 3 years, once you go out that door, you deliver it, the value is subjective of what that audience thinks that they want to put the value on it.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly important that you as an individual are happy with the work that you're doing, but with the output, but also, I guess, how you've supported yourself and shown up through that process. And if you've enjoyed the process, that matters so much more intrinsically than any sort of value that's going to be out there and subjective, right? That's the lovely sort of cherry on top, but that's not what's going to fulfill you through to the next project, which is what we want. Because if you want to keep doing it, if you're just going to sort of burn the midnight oil, try and fill your cup up with that sort of, if you do one show, if you do a season of shows, whatever it is, or auditions, and then hope that sustains you till the next light, it isn't sustainable, I suppose. So
Yeah.
what do you expect from yourself, and how are you supporting yourself in getting there? So that could be looking at really basic things. So there is a thing called the mental health continuum. It's a lovely graphic, and it shows you sort of where our mental health sits day to day, hour to hour. So just like our physical health, some days you might feel really strong in your body, and other days you might feel like a couch potato. You know, if you identify as female, or if you have a uterus, you might also have times within, you know, your cycles where physically you feel differently as well. So there are biological factors, not just our physical factors at play. So thinking about things like our sleep, our nutrition, really, really basic things. Our hobbies, are we doing stuff to fill our cup up that we don't have a expectation or monetized outcome to it, like cooking, dancing, like just around the kitchen? I mean, you know, singing really badly, patting a dog, going for a swim, trying to grow a succulent. Like there's so many wonderful things that you can do, things that can really fill our cup up, get ourselves off our screens. I'm holding my phone up, but a green screen, but really trying to minimize that. So stuff that you're like, right, this just sounds like really like basic health stuff, and it is, because that's the foundation, right? So if you want more, it's really about setting those foundational strategies and supports for ourselves. Also connection, we provide, or we expect, a whole lot of connection and support from our significant other. It's impossible for one person to meet all your needs, right? Like I'm in the arts and culture and mental health. My husband is like a football and cricket fanatic, right? So like on paper we just don't mesh. Somehow we really like each other, but on that space, like we just don't fulfill each other's needs, right? So even in that space, having the people that you can like talk to, connect with, understand, so you have similar interests, similar goals, or you're working towards a similar outcome. So that could be if you volunteer, it might be that you are spiritual, and so maybe you have places of like worship or faith that you go to. It could be an art club, it could be a gardening club, it could just be an online forum where you can chat to people about different things. But there are so many different connections that we need in our life, so really making sure that you're seeking that support locally or online, depending on where you might find that. So I would start with those foundational things, understanding the mental health continuum and where you may be, because there are spaces where we are like right up the top. We've got thriving, right, which is like, or excelling, thriving. They're both really lovely, but I guess when we look at things like high output, so there's days where you have a whole lot of energy, you just sort of like smash a rehearsal or the things that you got to get through, and you're like, I don't know what I did, but today I'm like loving today. So those days, and those days are also days where we're most likely to experience flow a lot more, right? And so, which is amazing, is a person doing creative stuff. So having those really high levels of output are when we're more at that higher end of the mental health continuum. And as we move down the continuum into like surviving, so that might be feel a little bit anxious, a little bit irritable, a little bit distracted, maybe a little bit withdrawn, that output starts to fall or decrease, and it requires a lot more effort for us to have that level of output. And then as we move really low down the continuum, that's where we're withdrawing from everything. You know, our sleep is disrupted, our eating is disrupted, our social activity is disrupted. We just want to stay home and like really withdraw. So that area, it's a lot harder to get out of bed, brush our teeth, show up to rehearsals, meet our cues, right? So, and that's not a you problem. It's not that you've lost your creative ability, which is what, you know, 18-year-old Aimee would have thought when I had performance anxiety. Is, oh my God, I've just decided, no, what's wrong with me? It's that it's your health. So just like physically, you might feel a lot stronger some days, other days you might not want to go for a walk around the block, or it takes a lot of effort to walk around the block, and that's okay. And so I think what that then does is allows us to have conversations with ourselves, but also maybe those that we're working with in regards to what they could expect from us and what we can expect of ourselves. Because if you're expecting peak performance on a day that you are surviving or down the really low end of the mental health continuum or spectrum, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder. And so how can we support ourselves to, when we are in those sort of lower ends of the continuum, because it will happen, whether we eat, sleep, exercise, you know, we all experience those times. How do we implement those things? Eat, sleep, exercise, connection, hobby. That's the stuff that helps us move up the continuum and recover. So the less we implement of that, the more likely we are going to stay on the lower end of the continuum or stay there for longer periods of time. And that's when things can get a little bit tricky, a little bit more complex. Mental illness can start to develop, things like that as well. So I guess if someone's starting out, that's probably where I would start. The really sort of basic, how do I turn up? How do I track myself and my output? You know, it's not just about delivering the things that are on cue, or, you know, how you present physically. It's also the sort of mental health components and stuff as well. So, and making sure that you've got people around you that can facilitate and understand those sorts of outputs, I suppose, right? Because as creatives, we want to, a lot of the time, share the best parts, which is great. We don't get a whole lot of them. So when we do get them, we want to share them, and we do, but also having those conversations about maybe the not so great days, and that there are things that are within our control and outside of our control that affect us where we're sitting on that. Like we touched on vicarious trauma or being in that sort of real method space. If we're delivering a really confronting body of work, chances are we might not be at the thriving end a whole lot of the time. We might be in the more surviving end, right? And just trying to get to the end. And that's okay. But how do we support ourselves whilst we're in that? And then also, like, once we're through that season, how do we recover as well? So then we go back into it. So that's where I would say to start. And then I guess once you have a really lovely foundation of, you know, that continuum, how you look after yourself, start to diarize or journal maybe where you're sitting and how you're feeling and what did that look like, or you know, physically and emotionally, how do you want to recreate that again? What worked for you, what didn't work for you? Sort of start to experiment, because it's a really personal thing, but you know, it's also stuff that you can maybe talk to your peers about in regards to what works for them, what didn't. I think that's a really great place to start. And also, I guess beyond that, really putting a space for the days where maybe things don't go great and we do need that sort of support, that real pointy end stuff. So who are your sort of 3 people that you can call and talk to? They don't have to be a paid service. It could be a helpline, or it could be, you know, a parent, a family member, a friend, a peer, a manager, whoever it is, that person that you can sort of lean on, I suppose. Having those sort of 3 people that make you feel good. So like people, places and things, I think are really great. People that make you feel good, places that you can go to sort of re-energize yourself, if that's a body of water, if it's trees, if it's the backstage, you know, or somewhere that you're inspired, wherever that is. So those places and things are things that you can do to fill your tank up as well. So when we are in that continuum, that can really help us, which are like those hobbies or trying new things or movement. So I'd say they're probably the best place to start. And then you can start to like plug in the, you know, how do I de-roll, and you know, that's where we start to add the spices and the sort of zest and stuff. But it doesn't matter how many courses you do on de-rolling and stuff. If you're going to go home and not move your body for a week and eat KFC or Uber Eats for the week, right, you're probably not going to feel your best. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I know it was a big question.
No, taking that up a notch, say they're on, so last year KB and I both did, in different roles, heavy shows. KB was in Carrie, and I did a production of Heathers just as a photographer. But I guess we were having conversations around that time, how we were being affected by the show, and we've got each other to lean on. Say that next level up, say they're in a little bit of a crisis, they're actually being triggered, or they're just not coping. Where can they find some resources to just seek that little extra level of help and support that maybe those self-care level isn't satisfying for them?
Yeah, no, I love that. So I guess the sort of next level of support can look different for everyone again. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be talking to someone. I know different people sort of lean into different things. So for that, I guess to have maybe a body of resources there that you can sort of go to. So when you are in those really tricky productions, like you said, you might have each other to lean on, but you don't have to sit down and go, right, support for creatives who are burnt out, or whatever it is. So trying to sort of start to create or put together those places that you can turn to. But I guess as far as resources, so if we go into, say, talking to someone, helplines, wonderful. There's the Support Act helpline, so you can access counselling sessions. I think it's currently 12 per annum for free, which is amazing. That's open to all creatives, currently funded through Creative Workplaces. Things to be mindful of: funding and helplines change, so that might not be forever. But it is a service that, if you need to talk to someone, is there and eligible. You could also lean into finding someone locally, you know, turning to a service like Haymate is always really helpful. Then there's, I guess, resources that you could plug into. So, or also, I guess, going back to the talking, like Kristen, you mentioned the producer, where they had a service there for you to use. So depending on if it's a community theatre or a paid gig or whatever, what supports are there and available for you within that remit. So exploring there, you might not have to sort of reach out on your own. There might be stuff there that they can support you with. And then I guess resources, so literature or guides, strategies. So we have a wealth of them on the Haymate website. Creative Workplaces has guides and webinars on all different things, including like funds and grants and marketing and all that sort of stuff, because I know all that stuff also stresses people out. So, or like, what is a psychosocial hazard, which is like any spiky hazard in your workplace, whether it's voluntary or not, or things like, how do you like, you're working for free, what's legal and what's not. So that's a great one.
Perfect.
Right? Yeah. And so that's on their website, because sometimes I was having a conversation with someone the other day about part of their gig is paid, but then the rehearsals they're doing for free. So what does that then mean? And they don't want to rehearse a lot, obviously, because that means they're not getting paid for their time. But other people do want to rehearse a lot because it might be their first gig and they're really excited and want to do a good job. So what does that look like? So there's resources there. Unions or peak bodies that might be able to support you in different spaces, particularly if things get spiky. They can provide support because, you know, uncomfortable situations or situations where we're unsure can lead to stress, right? Or feeling anxious. So it could also be addressing that cause of the stress as well, rather than just the emotion that we're experiencing. The Arts Wellbeing Collective unfortunately closed at the end of last year, but what they did leave is a legacy piece on their website with a whole heap of resources on how to tour well, how to manage well, really lovely researched evidence-based resources that are completely free. So and weirdly enough, when it closed down, that is what everyone was talking about, was, oh, you know, we share their guide with everyone, and we're talking about like big companies, individual companies, or just like freelancers. So they can be really, really helpful because you're not being lectured at and you can sort of take what you want from them, you know. which then I guess leads into that sort of lived experience, or sort of listening or reading about people's experiences. So sometimes you might not be in a place where you're like, I'm burnt out and I need to talk to someone. You might just be like, I'm really tired and I'm agitated and I can't really sleep, but I'm not sure what's wrong. But if you were to listen to a podcast about someone who is experiencing burnout, or how they've navigated different conversations, or so podcasts can be really wonderful resources, and guides as well. So I'd say they're probably the ones that you could definitely lean into beyond sort of the self-care, but really sort of looking at, what is it that you can sort of collate and put to the side for when we do need it, because that's the last thing we want to do, is sit down and actually like research it. But also, if you're doing a body of work, whether it be paid or not, maybe you can't afford you're like, we're all volunteering, we can't afford an EAP, but like that's a perfect opportunity for being like, right, but we know that if something goes wrong, the Support Act helpline is there, right? Or that there are these other resources that we can sort of lean on and talk about. So there are things that you can do that are low or no cost as well, to really sort of, I guess, bolster and support yourselves in that space. And I guess we were talking about de-rolling, maybe researching, if we're learning how to de-roll or plug in those sort of professional developments, who is teaching us how to de-roll? What is their experience? What strategies are they putting in place? Are these research-based? I guess, thinking about the right plugins, and if it's in a way that is sustainable, because we know a lot of us know now that the things we need to be doing in a healthy way, right, to create a healthy environment. But with that being said, there are still strategies and stuff that might be counterintuitive or counterproductive in that space, and a bit of that like old world mentality as well, sort of laced in underneath. So just being cautious about what you take and what you leave as well.
Absolutely. That's great. And that's something that comes up a lot of the time, finding the right person, the right thing, the right resource for you as a person. We talked about that in our accounting episode. We've talked about that in other about headshot photographers. Everyone, and the same absolutely goes for counseling, psychology services. I know a lot of friends or people who have been like, oh, how do you find your therapist? I was like, my therapist is great for me. I love my therapist for me, but you got to try before you buy sometimes, like a hairdresser.
Truly.
You're going to click or you're not going to click, or there's just going to be something that is necessary to navigate so that you get the best support possible. We talked a little bit about burnout there. I guess my next question is then, like, if we're moving towards surviving and lower in that continuum, what are some, I think the term like burnout or anxiety can get thrown around a lot of the time without any real knowledge of what that might look like. So what are some of the signs that might pop up to make you go, oh, I might not be okay?
Yes, I love that. So I guess when we talk about mental health, right, we can sometimes use the term mental health for when we're in those lower ends. Like you said, you're feeling burnt out or something's not right and you're not feeling great, but you're not sure how not great you are and where that sort of leans. And I think that's why the mental health continuum, or really having a strong understanding of yourself and those baselines and those strategies, is so important, because mental health is actually about what's going right, not what's going wrong. So we look at, where are you when you're great? So you might be eating really well and the foods you like to eat are X, Y, Z. You might be going for a morning walk. You might be calling your mum at least once a week, or you may have to call her back. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. You are turning up to some regular classes or hobbies that you really enjoy. You've seen your friends in the last month. These sorts of things. So thinking about what that looks like doesn't mean that life is perfect, but what are those things that look great for you, or you feel good in? And then start to think about, what are you starting to not do?
Yeah.
Or what are you starting to engage in instead of? So you might really love cooking, or your meals might be like at the moment I'm loving like halloumi and chicken and like a salad sort of thing, right? It sounds really healthy, but it's absolutely delicious. Whereas like, have I ordered Uber Eats for dinner every night this week? Like, and I just haven't had the energy to cook. Have I actually seen friends in the last month? Have I called my mum back? You know, have I done something nice for me? So thinking about those things, because what will happen is those things will start to drop off. So the World Health Organization has a really lovely descriptive of what mental health is. And it's basically that we turn up with a sense of purpose and community, and we can feel like we can handle the stresses of life and we can cope, right? But we have those sorts of other things happening along. That feeling of coping and that resilience starts to diminish, and those things that we love doing start to drop off. And that is the biggest indicator that I can give you. We don't have a big red light, unfortunately, until we get to the stop where like our bodies physically make us stop, which we definitely don't want to get to. But that real sort of connection and relationship with yourself is such an important place to embed. But I guess when we talk about anxiety, or if we talk about burnout, so anxiety, we can have the emotion of feeling anxious, right? So when someone mentioned anxiety to me, I thought it was like pre-show nerves. That's what I related anxiety to. I was like, can't relate to her, but yeah, I get it. Like I get a bit. But when it came into my life and I started to experience it, I didn't go, oh yeah, what I'm experiencing right now is anxiety. I was like, something is wrong and I don't know what is wrong, but I feel like an impending doom and I need to be worried about everything and everyone hates me, even though I haven't spoken to anyone in the last week, you know. So so you can have an emotion of feeling anxious, and it could just be for a particular reason. But then there are also anxiety disorders that are there. So, you know, performance anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, fear of large spaces, lots of different ones. So you can, those illnesses or mental illnesses are diagnosed by a clinician. So we're talking about your general practitioners or your doctors, your psychologists, or your not your psychotherapist, psychiatrist. Thank you. I was like, wait, that's wrong. So your psychotherapists and your counselors cannot diagnose, but they can provide you with those strategies to support in that space. So that is also why, just like our partners, sometimes it might not be up to one clinician to make us feel good with everything. Sometimes there are different individuals that play different parts at different stages. So with anxiety, when we're feeling that maybe sense of impending doom, or that sort of overwhelming sense for, you know, more than a day, more than a week, those longer periods, and we're like, I just cannot shake this. That's when we really want to start to talk to someone about that and get those strategies and support. So there's the emotion of feeling anxious, and then there's the mental illness of anxiety. Just like with depression or having a sort of low state and then being depressed, or also, you know, if you do live with a uterus, and there are things that you can experience during your menstrual cycle called PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder as well, which is like same thing, impending doom. Sometimes there can be thoughts of suicide. Like it can be really, really dark for some people experiencing that. Next week, good as gold, right? So so we can experience different things, I guess. It's not just if we're experiencing the emotion for maybe a short period of time that we're like, oh, I've got XYZ. So I guess just thinking about that. But then burnout's an interesting one, because burnout is so we talk about mental health, and it's when we can experience those stresses, but we can cope. And that's why we need to allow ourselves those times to have downtime, right? Rest. We don't earn rest. Rest is at the foundational piece, just like the sleep and the exercise and the nutrition and the connection and the hobbies. Rest is there, right? Think about football players. They play one game a week, and then they have rehab, and then they'll go for a massage, and they have nutritionists, and then they'll dabble a bit through the week, and then they'll play the next Saturday or Friday or whenever. So if you are a performer and you're performing 2 shows a day for 6 days a week, or if you're building up to a community theatre show, or whatever it is, or maybe the stresses of studying, right? It's really important that you embed those bits of rest, because that's what helps us manage those stresses. Burnout is when we have a long exposure to a stress or stresses and we don't allow ourselves time to release that stressor, or that output is too much, right? We're just, I guess, whipping ourselves, expecting ourselves to turn up without having time to rest. So that's why things like sustainable, tours and downtime is really important. Rehearsal periods, whether you have a day, like a day job and a night job or whatever it is, really embedding those bits of practice, because we talk about that level of performance or output. If you're expecting yourself to have peak performance or really high levels of output, but what you've been exposing yourself to is unsustainable, you're going to get to the end and you're going to wither and burn out, right? So burnout is those longer exposures, and so it can start to affect, we lose interest in the creative process, we feel a bit meh about everything, the things that light joy up in us. So you'll have at least 1 or 2 things that you love. I've got some doggos that I absolutely love. I love going to the beach. I love my plants, I love some sunshine or bodies of water. They're the things that really get me going. I've got a couple of people that I love to call and they really fill my cup up. It's when those things don't really hit the spot you usually do. You might have gone for a walk. You're like, I'll go for a walk. I feel great after. And you're just like, oh, that didn't really do much. So take the holiday if you've got the burnout, right? So burnout, take the rest, but love the holiday. I'll never talk anyone out of taking a holiday. If you're going to come back though post-holiday and expect yourself to work the same way, to not rest, you're going to burn out again, and you'll probably burn out quicker this time. So burnout is something that is pretty prolific at the moment, because I feel like we are getting faster and faster and faster as a space in an industry, but we're also realizing that cycle is a hazard for us. And so if we want sustainable artistic outputs and to actually enjoy what we do, we're going to have to work out scheduling that is sustainable for everyone, including not just the performers, but also our tech, our roadies. What is sustainable, because they can't do 14-hour shifts and then turn up 6 hours later, right? Like it's unsafe. So burnout, something we experience, but also something that we do need to rest and reset and recalibrate with. And it's not a reflection on us as an individual and our capabilities, but it is a sign. It's our body's warning sign saying something is not right. You need to slow down. And if you don't slow down, your body may slow down for you. So, and that's not what we want. We do the work because we love it, right? So we want to be in a space where we can turn up and really enjoy it, because it can be really scary if we are, a principal dancer and all of a sudden we wake up and we don't love dancing.
Yeah.
It is.
What do we do?
Yeah.
So I guess, that's why that sort of real grassroots stuff is so important. But really, I guess, just having that conversation with ourselves in regards to how we feel, and also talking to people when we're not feeling this great, because sometimes we don't have the self-awareness that maybe we've been experiencing burnout for a while, until someone goes, you've actually been experiencing this for like few weeks now, is everything okay? Or like you haven't been yourself for X amount of time. So that's why that dialogue is really important. And it doesn't have to be we're not talking about major life shifts either. So for me, I was burnt out maybe 18 months ago, and the indicator for me, it wasn't anything to do with work, and it wasn't creative, it was that I would go and see my granny pretty regularly, once a week. And one afternoon, I thought, I'm not going to go see her. I've just got to do this work thing. So I did that. And then the next week, I did the work thing, and I didn't go see her for a series of like 6 weeks until my dad said, "We haven't seen your granny in a while. Is everything okay?" And I thought, and I didn't even realize, like, I completely checked out.
Yeah.
And yes, that was like seeing my granny, but it was also downtime away from screens, away from work, connection, doing stuff, that was enjoyable. She'd show me her garden, or we'd talk, or, so that was accumulative over 6 weeks to be enough that I, was not, a fulfilled version of myself. So burnout is a very interesting one. It can sneak up on us as well.
Yeah, and I think very easy for this industry, because a lot of the time when we are emerging, we are doing a lot of things for free because we want to build that resume, we want to build the experience, we want to make connections. I know when I started out, I was working like 60-hour weeks nonstop for years, for years and years and years. And then I went on my first tour, and I came back and I have chronic fatigue because I just let the burnout kick, because it was fine. I can keep going, I can keep going, I can keep going, I can keep going. Didn't really rest properly that first time, went back out on tour, and now the body has said no more. And for 2 years we've kind of been on this, like, I say half speed, which is like only because now I'm working 30 hours a week.
Like, so your half speed is not a half speed, my love.
But it's my half speed. Yes. But I think that was the thing, is that, like, when I was coming up through the industry, it was very much like, say yes to as many things as possible, because you want to do as much as possible to get your name out there, and you don't want to burn bridges, and you don't want to be a bother, and you don't want to, there was so much pressure.
The show must go on.
The show must go on.
You had to just keep going and pushing and doing. Yeah.
And you did. And I know there were so many times where I was like ill. I was running off stage, vomiting, running back on stage, doing the show. Like, the show must go on was a big thing as we were learning. So I think, and a lot of us are very good at being like, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. This is nothing. We're fine. All good.
'Tis but a flesh wound.
And then, eventually your body does stop. And that's something that I have been talking a lot to friends about, because I see it. I see the signs of things that I was doing previously. And we're driving all over the place, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, just to work. But all of that takes a toll. So I think if we can, one, start seeing the signs within ourselves early enough, that is a great thing. And two, learning that no is an absolutely reasonable thing to say within our industry.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we should practice more than yes.
Yeah. It's something that you can negotiate. And I was so nervous to tell people that I didn't have capacity. I just was like, I don't have the spoons. This is
my favorite phrase.
I don't have the spoons.
I don't have the spoons.
And it's like,
I love it.
The idea is that you have a spoons drawer, right? And every time something takes something out of you, you give away a spoon. And so eventually, if you're not bringing those spoons back in, the same thing as filling your cup, you don't have any spoons left in the drawer.
Nope.
So sometimes I feel like that is a good analogy for people who are maybe a little bit more visual, of like, okay, well, this drawer is absolutely empty. I've given out all I can. And there are some sections of the spoon drawer that are kept for certain people, certain things. But the idea of having to tell producers and directors, when I did Carrie, I had just been diagnosed with my second round of chronic fatigue. And I came into the rehearsal process being like, I have long COVID and chronic fatigue. I don't know what that's going to mean. And that makes me terrified.
Yeah.
But my new motto is, we don't kill ourselves for theatre. And we don't kill ourselves for anything, really. And that, for me, is in terms of mental and physical health. It isn't like unaliving at all. But just the sheer amount of work we put in, because we feel like if we don't say yes, it's the end of our career.
Yeah.
But it's just not the case. And most people can be very mindful of capacity and very mindful of mental health now in comparison to what it was 20 years ago when we were first coming through. And then these conversations are, I think, incredibly important to be transparent. Being transparent with a creative team, with a cast, with anything to do with the industry is difficult, scary, but oftentimes won't come back in a negative way. So we hope that we can try and make things a bit better.
Yeah.
By opening up the conversation here, at least on our podcast.
Our little podcast.
The podcast that is always like, I send Britt a message like every day being like, I'm so sorry I haven't done this yet. And she's like, no.
We're in the middle of a period of our friendship at the moment. We are so busy in this last few weeks of the year. And like it's gotten to the point where KB and I are just going, you good? Okay. I'm good. Like, sorry, this is all we can manage right now, but we're checking in, we're doing that, we're fine. But you know, in our thriving, we're like voice notes back and forth, we're checking in with each other, and at the moment we're doing the whole, okay, well in 2 weeks we're gonna feel really good and chat to each other. Like we are like setting an intention that in 2 weeks we are gonna feel lighter, we're gonna be less busy, and we're looking towards that you know, reconnection in 2 weeks. But
at the moment we're in the amber light zone. We're heading towards the green. We
can
see it.
Really 2 more weeks, babe, 2 more weeks.
But I definitely think that younger performers, particularly, and even people who have been working for years and years and years and years and years are coming up against the same issues, right? So I think it would be silly of us to pretend that this is just an emerging topic. This is absolutely across the board, not issue, but I guess something that needs to be a little bit more open, transparent, welcome in the space. So,
and that's the one thing that I think COVID has helped with is just more of a discussion about health and when people should be stepping back and taking time for their health, whether that's physical health, mental health, whatever. I think COVID actually then opened the book a little bit on, hey, the way we do things isn't normal. And, you know, we're not helping each other by keep pushing through this.
yeah.
So that's the one thing that I'm grateful to COVID for. Not a lot else, but that is the one thing that I'm grateful, is that a kind of a shift in mentality about not continuing to push and not, you know, affecting others, and not, it's just a little bit more of a health focus, which I like.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The rest of COVID can go.
Yes, it can. I guess as a kind of final note, I've talked to a lot of performers lately that are in a show, whether that's in a community theatre show, in a professional show, and an independent show, who are not present in the show that they're in. They're looking forward to the next job and the next job. This is auditioning, I want this role. This is auditioning next, I want this role. Or my contract's about to end, I need work. And that's not just in the performance sphere. We get that in the tech sphere as well, of like, because this work is often contracted, often short term, rent is getting higher, cost of living is getting higher, we're constantly in that where's the money going to come from next? Do you have any advice, I guess, because I feel like this falls under the mental health sphere of how do we enjoy the moment that we're in while also making space for the next thing?
Yeah. I mean, that the contract or the gig stuff, that is, I guess, part of the environment and space that we're in. Like you said, it's nothing that we can avoid. You know, I guess the stuff that we're sort of describing here are the hazards, the psychosocial hazards of the industry that we work in. So just like, you know, miners or ambulance workers or all sorts of gigs have psychosocial hazards, but ours in the arts are particularly unique, which we're like, oh, this is a little bit harder, a little bit unenjoyable, this aspect. And there is no silver bullet for it. It is part of the gig. So we can experience it, but I guess, like you said, Kristen, like, how do we experience it and make it a little bit more enjoyable, or in a space where it's not it's not taking up all of our brain power, so we can enjoy, particularly, you know, the fruits of our labor as our latest production is coming to an end, or whilst we're enjoying it, etc. So I would say those sort of intrinsic goals or parts that you love about the body that you're working on. So if it is the relationships that you've built during that production, or that you're really proud of this role that you've gotten, and really, I guess, being not strict's not the word, but I guess having the conversation with yourself that I'm really just going to try to enjoy this aspect. It doesn't have to be everything, but maybe you just try and make yourself available to enjoy the pre, post, and during show, and then, you know, you make time the next morning to carve out that sort of the hustle culture or part of the gig. And I think that's probably coming back down to the conversation we had around sustainable workload and what that looks like, and that is really building in those times of maybe where we do need to sit down and build relationships or plan out what is our next contract or opportunity, and we might do that during X part of the week. So then when we get to B, you know, we can be present. We're not sort of worrying because we didn't call a producer or respond to that email, or maybe we've done nothing, right? And we've just sort of stuck our head in the sand and we've avoided. And now, like, the light's coming, we're like, oh no. So yeah, I guess looking at how we can sort of build that in sustainably, so we can just sort of set it, thinking about, like, when we would study for exams or assignments, try not to cram in at the very last moment, try to build it in where you can, and also understand that there are things that you can control and things that you can't control about that. You know, you can control the effort that you make in setting yourselves up for opportunities, but you can't control whether you get the yes or the no.
Yeah.
So what you also can control, though, is how you show up at those gigs or those shows, and whether you are present or not, and really trying to not think about what's next until you've allocated that time to, because it'll go so quickly and you'll say, oh, I wish I enjoyed that more. Or so yeah, I guess sort of having those conversations around how do we show up and really be present, or what is it that you can implement for yourself to be present. And again, that also comes down to enjoying what we're doing. So the more stressed, the more burnt out, the more anxious, the more we are, the more in our head we're going to be when we turn up, right? So the less present we can be, the less we can sort of really be in the process and in the flow and what we enjoy about the show. Whereas if we can try to set ourselves up so we can turn up, even if it's for like 3 or 4 hours, and then go back to stressing or doing what it is, that will help, I guess, in that process. But we can control how we show up, and we can control how we try and support ourselves as best as possible. That we can't control the outcome at the end, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. It's hard. We'd love to be in control. That'd be great.
Oh yeah.
It just can't happen. Great. Is there anything that you'd like to touch on that we haven't already in this chat?
We've done a lot. Done a lot, yeah. Absolutely. I guess probably, I think just what you touched on before, Kristen, around not wanting to let people down, and the saying yes and the no, and having that real clear boundary around that you're not going to stretch yourself so thin for theatre, and I think that's a great place to be. And I'm sorry to hear that, you know, it's gotten to a point where for when you've learnt that. And I think it's when we're in that space, particularly if it's opportunities, right, we're like, we have to say yes because we don't want to upset them. Like, we want to be the right person for them and the right fit. Yeah. But there's also the dialogue, is this the right opportunity? Are these the right people for me?
Yeah.
Because as much as opportunities provide us with something, we are providing the show or the individual something that no one else can bring, which is ourselves, right? Yeah. So really thinking intentionally, particularly if things are difficult or uncomfortable, or we feel like we're stretching ourselves, or maybe we've tried to establish boundaries but they haven't listened, or they said they'd do something and they didn't follow through.
Yeah.
Or you ask for something in writing and they don't do it in writing but they'll do it over the phone.
Yeah.
These sorts of things. Yeah. Really trust your intuition on these things, and really be clear and articulate with what you're asking, because I guarantee what you're asking is not too much. But if it's received as it is too much, then just thinking about, okay, what is the payoff here? What is this going to give me that I need it for? Because the show doesn't need to go on. You know, we know that through COVID as well, is that it's uncomfortable and sometimes there are repercussions, but we can always reschedule. And I would say a happy artist is better than an unhappy or an unhealthy artist as well, right? And that's what we want to do. But yeah, I guess just thinking about your boundaries and what you bring to the space or the room as well. It's not always that sort of that power dynamic which we sort of put on, particularly for those that are directors or producers and opportunities, that you bring something, and if they don't see it, then that's on them.
Yeah. Hands down, that is definitely a lesson I've learned over the part, like post-COVID. It's like picking the projects and the people for you, not just for your resume or for this idea of the more I work, the more it will turn into X, Y, or Z. Because at the end of the day, you do have to be happy and content in your career and healthy, which is what we want for 2026.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Britt, anything from you?
No, other than we will write down some of the points and resources and make sure that that's available as well. We'll just make sure that there'll be it in case you didn't take notes in the Patreon, but we'll put some stuff in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. And Aimee, if anybody's hoping to reach out to Haymate, where can they find you?
Yeah, all the places you would usually find us. So we're Haymate or the Haymate Project. If you pop us into Google, we're on Instagram, Facebook. And working with all good theatres and arts bodies and bits and pieces around. So
yeah, it's so exciting. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, truly.
Thanks for having me. It's been a very comprehensive chat, and good, because I think it's reminded myself of stuff as well, so I really appreciate that.
I talk too much, but I love this topic so much. I think it's so important. If you're looking to find us because you would like to tell us what you'd like to hear next, or that you just want to tell us how great we are, I don't know, it's up to you. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at takenotes.pod, or you can email us at hello@takenotespod.com.au. I think I find no.au.
We're just .com.
Right. I'm just like, I get it wrong at least once every episode. So today
it gives them something to work towards. They have to figure out where to actually find us. It's fine.
If you would like early access to episodes, or access to different resources, you can also find us on Patreon. But yay, I think that's it. We're definitely awesome. We'll probably have you back at some point, Aimee. This is the conversation that will never end.
Yes.
Yes, please.
And we hope that you are all having a recovery day on the 1st of January, because let's start the year off right with some rest.
Well, and if you're listening to us on the 1st of January, tomorrow on the 2nd of January, we will be attending Annie. So keep your eyes peeled on our socials.
Yay!
For a little peek of Annie.
Which will be very, very fun. It just keeps going.
Just keeps going.
With rest. But with rest. We're going to take that away from this episode.
Sustainably.
All right, everyone. Our next episode will be hopefully the 1st of February, but we might have a little bonus episode in between, so keep your eyes peeled. But we will see you, or you'll hear us very soon. Bye!